Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
What is up? Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast. It is a Friday, which means this is the GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition of it. And of course, this podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am Tom Dougherty, your host, and we'll be talking about the Big 12 today. We're going to talk about some Jim Harbaugh comments when it comes to paying players. You know, I've given my comments about how players should be treated, and payment of players. And then we'll go over Harbaugh's comments that he made today, and we'll also talk about the coaching rankings around the college football world and who are really the best coaches in college football. And we'll get to that probably around the fourth segment today, and the third segment will be Harbaugh, and the Big 12 will take up probably the first two segments, as there are 10 teams to get through and give my comments about, as we'll probably use the first two segments to do that. We'll do the first segment will probably be the Big 12, top of the Big 12. They don't have standings in the Big 12, so they don't have divisions. It's kind of making it difficult for me. So I'm gonna be able to bounce around, or I'll just go down the order. We'll find out as we go along here, but no divisions, so there's no order. They just finally put back the Big 12 championship game, so now all of these conferences have championship games. I don't know how they actually decide whether they don't really have divisions, whether you win your division, you get to the championship game, or it's just the top two teams play each other, whatever may have you. So, just the way it goes there in the Big 12, it's kind of a weird conference. I don't know. I have my own thoughts about that conference and how weird it is, but I'll probably figure out by the time while we're talking here how they figure out who goes to the Big 12 championship game. As far as these Big 12 schools, obviously we have Oklahoma, who just lost their quarterback to the draft. First pick overall, Baker Mayfield was the Oklahoma quarterback. Got them to the college football playoff last year. Now they're going to have to deal with without him. Obviously, I think Lincoln Riley is quite prepared for that, though, as he should be just fine. With Kyler Murray, likely, because he's playing baseball right now. We kind of have gone over Kyler Murray, and we did go over Oklahoma in the couple shows ago because we were doing the top 25. But I can just go out and say it again that they just continue to truck on, continue to get good. Obviously, there's definitely is a different predicament when it comes to whether Kyler Murray is going to get drafted by a Major League Baseball team. If he's going to finally we're going to get another one of these quarterbacks. Like John Elway was drafted into Major League Baseball. I think Johnny Manziel honestly was drafted super, super late round just for a random, I don't know, I think it was the Padres drafted him or something like that. He came out and threw the first pitch for them. Padres drafted Johnny Manziel. There's I don't know, baseball has 30 rounds in their draft, so you literally can draft anybody. But Kyler Murray actually is a real baseball prospect and could get drafted early rounds. So he'll have a decision to make. Obviously, he is ranked right now as the 36th best prospect in the MLB draft. So that's early second round right there for Kyler Murray, and he'll probably have a big decision to make when it comes to I just got drafted by, I don't know who's picking 36th in this draft. Probably the Marlins or something like that, or who was the sixth worst team last year in Major League Baseball, the A's or something like that, gets picked by one of the teams, probably a bottom team in Major League Baseball, or somebody, or he drops and gets picked by the Astros or the Yankees or the Mets or something like that, and gets a big offer. What's he going to do? Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? So it's a big deal. So he'll obviously have some upfront financial security and certainty when it comes to the bonus he'll be getting for being drafted. But 36 pick. The slot value is about $1.97 million for a signing bonus for that. For a signing, not for a signing bonus, but for a contract for a rookie signing right out of the draft. That's the slot value. Remember, that's how it is in most drafts these days. Even in the NFL, they have every pick is allocated a certain amount of money. So definitely Uri. If baseball is his choice, he'll be instant millionaire. That's what Mr. Murray's got to decide. But I think his better if he feels it's a better chance, he wants to go play football. Obviously, he's already been. This is now his second college he's dealing with after going through Texas A&M. Going to be a decision to make for him, as I've already taken up almost half this segment talking about Kyler Murray and his decision to play baseball or not. But I mean, sorry, we've gone over Oklahoma a lot in this on this show. We'll shift gears over to let's go to Texas now, as they have Tom Herman, and they have to make some. I don't know if they have to make changes. They definitely need to let Tom Herman come along here and make Texas football, bring it back to where it was. Obviously, we thought every time we think they take a step forward, they take a step back. Last year, I mean, not so great, as they were 5-4 in conference, 7-6 overall. So a winning record, but not nearly where you want to be if you're Tom Herman. Obviously, they're trying to figure things out over there as they discuss different things. I know that they've had a couple good recruits come over to them from other teams, other commitments as well in the past. Obviously, we've seen now there's a 3-star tight end now saying that Texas is in its top 3. We have another Texas high school defensive back naming the Longhorns as one of his final choices. So we'll be seeing if they can get some talent later in this recruiting season. I know that Tom Herman is quite the recruiter, and that's one of the big reasons why they brought him in to Texas. I mean, they've kind of gone through a bunch of coaches in the last few years, to say the least. So we'll see how they go. As far as their schedule for this coming season, I already kind of went through the Oklahoma schedule. I think they are going to have Oklahoma at home, and they're going to have Oklahoma State on the road. So the Red River rivalry will be in Austin against the Sooners. They're also going to have TCU at home. So the tough teams in this conference those are the tough teams in their conference. And one of them, they're going to have to go to Texas Tech. They're going to have to go to Lubbock and play Texas Tech. That'll be a good game on November 10th. But the week before that, they're going to be in Stillwater, Oklahoma, playing the Cowboys there. And then before that, so it's a tough stretch right there. I mean, you got 4 weeks of football, boom, 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 pretty much to make your season. Obviously, they'll be hosting USC, as they do play USC a lot. We'll be hosting USC in the second game of the year here. I mean, it's the thing about Texas. They don't really schedule any cupcakes. They're one really like non-big school, non-big name school or big power conference school. I mean, every single team they play this year, except for Tulsa, which is I think week 2, they play Tulsa, and they will actually. So, of course, I'm reading the schedule wrong. They actually do get a game in between all those big games. It's not 4 weeks in a row. But so they get week 2, they play Tulsa after playing Maryland in the Big 10, Big 12 matchup. Then they're going to play USC at home, and they're going to have TCU, Kansas State, and then go into their conference schedule, obviously. But they're not playing University of Texas San Antonio. They're not playing UTEP. They're playing Tulsa. That's pretty much it. I mean, Maryland isn't that great. They should beat Maryland, but you never know, as Texas has had a history of underachieving quite a bit in the last few years. All right, next up, let's go to Virginia Tech. or no, not Virginia Tech. We already talked about them. West Virginia. Remember, West Virginia is in the Big 12. We talked about them. They could be a team that could be battling it out with Oklahoma. Their offense is kind of right where Dan Holgorsen wants it to be. They are in the preseason top 25. They are a team that can make some noise this season, obviously, as they are getting in with this new look offense. As they're trying to be more firepower. Obviously, they get a big transfer as they get the grad transfer Jabril Robinson coming over to West Virginia, and then also they have some more. So that's the former defensive tackle from Clemson, as he gets that goes over to West Virginia. Obviously, big deal for the Mountaineers there. Yeah, that's the graduate transfer coming over. So yeah, I don't know who they have. Will Greer. Yeah, that's right. Will Greer is the quarterback, right? Yeah, he's the guy who they're really hoping can take a step forward this year. Obviously, he's getting into the draft talk as well. Is looking to maybe make a name for himself in order to get into the top heads of NFL teams. Everybody's always looking for a quarterback, as he's now coming to a point where, he gets that offense down, he could really lead them to where they want to go. And looking at their schedule this year, just look kind of at a glance, it's they're going to have a couple interesting games. You have to give for a week. It is a week conference, the Big 12. That's why I thought Baker Mayfield wasn't quite ready for a number one pick, but they do schedule some good schools. Obviously, the only not really competitive game probably for them will be that game against Youngstown State in week 2. But they're going to play Tennessee in an SEC Big 12 matchup to start off the season. And they go to NC State, which is an ACC matchup. So then they're going to play Kansas State, and as they go into a conference play, they're going to play Kansas State at home. They play Oklahoma at home to close out the season. They have to go to Oklahoma State the week before that. And then also they play Texas in Texas as well. So, and everybody else is kind of down right now. But as far as those are the big schools, big competitive games for them coming up this season as we roll along here. In the first segment, I want to get a couple more teams in, as we've done 3 teams. I want to get 2 more. So there's 10 teams. The Big 12 has 10 teams. The Big 10 has 14 teams. That just goes to show you how they don't really care. It's all branding. Let's go Baylor. Baylor had a pretty rough season last year. Obviously, had some serious issues off the field. Art Briles has to step down, go away from the football program, away from the university after all the allegations from some misconduct happening with some of his players, as they now will have to get back into the good graces of everybody, the fans of football, college football fans, everybody. So I know that they're going to be having some interesting times during the season here today. This season, they are going to schedule a couple They're going to put. Speaking of University of San Antonio, Baylor will be playing them week 2. Then they have their ACC Big 12 matchup, as they do the interconference stuff, is going to be against Duke. That's going to be at home week 3. Then they start their conference play. They'll play in Oklahoma on September 29th. Then they're playing at Texas as well, and also at Texas Tech. They do play TCU at home in the battle of the private schools, the 2 Christian private schools in Texas. So TCU will have to go down to Waco and play at that beautiful stadium they have right there on the waterfront in Waco, Texas. So I like that. If you are a TCU fan, a little trip down there. All right, last team to talk about in this segment. Let's go Iowa State. They had an interesting season last year. Actually finished 8-5 on the year, 5-4 in conference play, but had 3 non-conference wins, which is pretty good for them. I think they also beat Oklahoma, I think, last year, right? Was that last year or the year before? I know that Iowa State had a big win in football. I know they had a big win in football last year, whether it was against Oklahoma or not. But just looking at the schedule, they beat Oklahoma That's right, 38-31. They did beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma was the number 3 team. So a big win for them. We'll see if they can bounce back and do it again this year, maybe win a couple more games and get into the top rankings of the conference, as they did finish 4th last year. They're going to be playing a couple their non-conference games are going to be against South Dakota State, and then they do play the interstate game against the Big 10 team. They will play Iowa, the Big 10, Big 12 matchup in week 2 of the season, actually. So they're going to do the rivalry game in week 2. Usually we see a rivalry week is one of the last 2 weeks of the season. They're going to play Iowa, and then they are going to host Oklahoma again. Or no, actually, they beat Oklahoma in Oklahoma last year. So they're going to host Oklahoma. They have to go to TCU. They're going to play. They're actually going to host Akron as well in between those 2 games. So non-conference stuff right there. But then they're also going to go to Stillwater to play Oklahoma State. They're going to host West Virginia and Texas Tech, and their other road games are in Kansas and in Texas. So kind of a middle of the road, kind of see how it goes schedule for the Iowa State Cyclones. All right, we'll come back with the rest of the Big 12 when we after this break, and we'll do that right in just a second.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition. Today on a Friday, as we are going through the Big 12 and kind of just giving you little snippets on each team, going through their schedules, talking about big games that could be tests for them. As we've gone through Oklahoma, we've talked about Iowa State, we've talked about Baylor, we talked about Texas and West Virginia, which leaves us now TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Kansas State, and also Texas Tech in there as well. Some good teams to talk about. Some good programs. I know Texas Tech was down last year. Kansas, not really a big football school at all, but definitely a basketball school, that's for sure. So let's start with TCU, as they are a team who can tend to disappoint throughout the year, as they did go 11-3 last year, which is a pretty nice record. But they think they got kind of screwed in the one of the first college football playoff rankings to happen. They got left out of the 4. Then they come back and have an 11-win season. But I mean, they have the ability to do it. They had some issues off the field with their starting quarterback. I know that they have to get some recruiting going when it comes to the fact that they need to revamp their roster a little bit, but they definitely have the ability to do that. Obviously, they have some tough games in their schedules. They have players departing their team, but obviously they keep having good coaching and good players coming back in, as they will be competitive again probably this year, as Gary Patterson will get them ready. Obviously, very good head coach there in Coach Patterson for the TCU Horned Frogs. I love that. I love that as a mascot. The Horned Frogs. They've got a little horned frog hand motion. So, as far as their schedule goes, their 2 games to start off the season are going to be hosting Southern U, and then also SMU. They're going to be on the road for that game, actually down playing Southern Methodist. So another couple private schools playing against each other. Then they're going to play Ohio State. I believe that game is at Ohio. Okay, so Ohio State I thought the game was in Arlington for some reason. I thought it was at Cowboy Stadium. I thought I was reading the Ohio State schedule, but it's telling me at Ohio. So they're going to play at Ohio State. Then they're going to come back and play at Texas in Austin before they have home games with Iowa State, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma all back to back. So that's not bad after going on the road for a little bit and then coming back for 3 home games. 2 average teams and then 1 good team in Oklahoma. We'll see if Kyler Murray's on the field there against the TCU team that's going to be tested by a talented Oklahoma team. So, as far as TCU's roster and how that's shaking out with their quarterback situation here. Kenny Hill is still there, but there's definitely question marks surrounding him as they will be probably figuring out what they want to do with the football this season. So with the quarterback this season. So he definitely is trying to get back in that good graces of the TCU fans. Obviously, he was at Texas A&M first, and then came over and has played well for the Horned Frogs in the past. All right. Moving on to the next school in the Big 12, let's go to Kansas State. They were 5-4 in conference, 8-5 overall in the season. If I'm reading that right, yep, 8-5 overall in the season, and just kind of the same thing as Iowa State, as they were identical schedules last year. Kansas State, they've definitely with their football program, they have the legendary coach there. Who's coming baback? Bill Snyder came back out of retirement and is now still obviously your legendary coach at Kansas State. And I've always, I remember one year when they had Klein, who was their quarterback, who was up there. They got up in the rankings. I think they're like 2nd or 3rd in the nation. Kind of regressed a little bit as now looking at their schedule. A bunch of home games to start off the season. They are going to play Mississippi State in a SEC battle. That'll be SEC Big 12 battle. That'll be a good game to look at there. Then they come home. Then they go on the road for West Virginia. They come home and play Texas. So that'll be a cool little stretch. They go road, home, road, West Virginia, Texas at home, and then back down to Texas to play Baylor before they come home. This is an interesting schedule. They don't really have any homes. They have one homestand, and they're never on the road twice in a row. Or they are once. One homestand and one road trip, really. Like one extended, one longer, one double back-to-back home games and one back-to-back road games. Everything else is kind of back and forth. Interesting scheduling there. This is they go back to Manhattan. Don't think about Manhattan, New York. Think about Manhattan, Kansas. That's where Kansas State University is. Just to let you guys know. They're going to be playing at home against Texas. Then they're going to go back to Texas and play Baylor and Waco. Come back home, play Oklahoma State. Then go. That's weird. They're playing at home against a Texas team. Then they're going to go to Texas and play another Texas team, Baylor. They're going to come back home, play Oklahoma State, and they're going to go to Oklahoma and play Oklahoma in Norman. So University of Oklahoma at Norman. So it's just weird, kind of some weird scheduling there. And they go back to Texas again and play TCU before coming home again and to play their interstate rivalry game against Kansas. And then go back to Texas again and then go back to Iowa. So kind of weird scheduling for the Kansas State Wildcats. We'll see if that's going to affect them this season. I know that they're not much news coming out for as far as them in spring football. So they kind of just like to fly under the radar and get their season going. As obviously we can go over a little review here with their obviously they had their spring game. It was April 21st, and they have some with their quarterback Alex Delton. They have to get that, as obviously it's going to be him battling it out against Skylar Thompson for that quarterback job up there in Manhattan. All right, as we come through the 6 minutes left in this segment, as we have a couple more teams to get to here, as we did Kansas State, we've done TCU, Oklahoma State. Now they were the third place in the Big 12 last year. Just missed out on that Big 12 championship game, and they were 10-3 on the season. As they, so that's the extra game basically. They were 10-3 versus their two teams played an extra game. They did did win their bowl game, as they were 6-3 in conference. So those 3 losses all came in conference. But Oklahoma State always been kind of the second fiddle to Oklahoma. But they've had some good teams as well. When they had Brandon Whedon, they got to a Fiesta Bowl, beat Stanford. But because Stanford couldn't make a field goal, that's just my problem because I'm a Stanford fan. But I mean, they've always had with Mike Gundy, who's been a very interesting and very cool coach with his mullet, his show hair. He likes to show it off. But I mean, playing in the shadow of Oklahoma obviously is going to be interesting. Always going to be fighting to be better. As this year, they're going to be kind of figuring out how they go along with their season. Obviously, you got some question marks around. I mean, every school does when it comes to they have quarterbacks and stuff like that. Obviously, it looks like Taylor Cornelius is the front runner coming out of spring practice to be that quarterback to replace Mason Rudolph, who is now a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know if if Ben Roethlisberger's favorite player, but he's there. As far as their schedule this season, it looks like that they're going to be opening up at home against Missouri State. They're going to have looks like 4 home games in a row to start off the season. It's weird how these schedules get made. I don't know if I think the school makes a lot of the schedule versus for the non-conference games, obviously. So they're going to have Missouri State, South Alabama, and then Boise State at home, and they'll open up Big 12 play with a home game against Texas Tech before they go to Kansas, play Kansas, come home for Iowa State. They're going to go to Kansas State. They're playing Texas at home, Baylor on the road. They have to go to Oklahoma for the in-state rivalry. That'll be a big game in Norman, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. That'll be November 10th. Before they come back home for West Virginia, they can go to Arlington or Fort Worth, Texas, to play TCU to finish off the season. So it'll be interesting to see. Probably, actually, right now, the only team of those top 3 teams in the Big 12, TCU, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State, only TCU has their quarterback, Kenny Hill, is returning. So, obviously, Oklahoma State having to replace Mason Rudolph and Oklahoma replacing Baker Mayfield. And we'll see how both those teams do that. And it'll be interesting to watch, obviously, as we get closer and closer to the decision to be made. I mean, we have all summer, but by the time it goes by, you'll be like, oh, where'd it go? Where the heck did it go? We got to make a decision here, and it's time for football. All right, 2 more teams, as I think we have Texas Tech and Kansas to get to. We'll start with Kansas before we finish with the Red Raiders really quickly. Just want to look at Kansas's schedule, as we'll give it to you here with the last couple minutes of the segment. The Jayhawks, not really a big football school. Obviously, the basketball school there in Lawrence, Kansas, and they kind of get stepped on a lot as they have to deal with all these. I mean, it wouldn't be high octane offenses. Nobody has a really big defense in the Big 12. There's a lot of offense, a lot of offense. But it looks like that there's going to be an interesting game as the 2 teams that are in the bottom of their division, bottom of their conferences usually, they're going to play Rutgers, which is a Big 10 school, and they're usually way down at the bottom of the Big 10, and they're going to play Kansas in Kansas week 3 before Kansas gets into their Big 12 schedule, where they're going to have to. The only big road game they're going to have to play, they're going to play at Oklahoma, which will be interesting. That's this first meeting since obviously last year when Baker Mayfield had his little show. Obviously they kicked their butts. The Kansas got their butts kicked by Oklahoma, but Baker Mayfield has little crotch grab action, and then nobody shook his hand in the middle of the field before the game started. They're also going to play against Oklahoma State at home, and then TCU at home as well in this season as well. So just a little outlook for the Jayhawks. Now over to Texas Tech. Got a little Texas Tech in their uniforms. I think Cliff Kingsbury has complete control over how their Texas Tech uniforms look like. It's always fun. Might have to do a uniform review show one time here, but we'll talk about Texas Tech for a minute here as they get their season going. Obviously, coming out of spring practice, there's always got to figure out what's going on, what things need more, what team needs more work. They had looks like their defense did prevail in their Texas spring game, but we'll see how everything kind of figures out when it comes to their offense and who's going to be behind center, as I want to look at their schedule really quick here before the segment ends. And we'll be coming back with some talk on Jim Harbaugh. But let's look at their football schedule. Look at their schedule really quick as we get through here. I know they're going to be playing. I've probably talked about that. We can figure out their schedule by how I was talking about before. They're going to have Ole Miss to start out the season. They're going to play SEC Big 12 matchup in Oxford, Mississippi. Then they're going to play Lamar and then University of Houston at home. And before they get into their Big 12 schedule, where they start off at Oklahoma State. That's a big road game for them. They're going to play Oklahoma at home. That's on November 3rd. And then they're also going to play Texas at home as well. So it's going to be interesting to see the play. They have to also go to TCU on October 11th. So some interesting games for the Red Raiders coming up this season, and some, I guess, half at home, half on the road against the top teams in this conference. All right, we'll see if they can get back up in the top of the rankings or standings for the Big 12. All right, that'll wrap it up for this segment, as we are already flying through the show today, as we're going to come back and give my thoughts. I'm going to probably have to go on a little rant here, as Jim Harbaugh has come out with comments regarding paying players and how we should value the education, and gives off a bunch of stats and stuff, and I have comments and my own stats to give when we come back after the break, so stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA Podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back, GSMC Football Podcast, as we get the third segment going here on a Friday, as we get you ready for the weekend. Well, you guys are ready for the weekend already. It's Friday. You've been ready since Wednesday. Some of you, like me, you've been ready since Tuesday. After Monday, you're just like, can we just get the weekend again? Nothing really going on. We had some probably NBA stuff, but we're talking football right now. This is College Football Show, as we have some comments coming out from Jim Harbaugh, actually. As he was at an event recently where he was awarded the key to the city of Toledo, Ohio, and he also made some comments regarding how college football players should be treated or handled financially. Obviously, he pulled out the whole 1%. That's my favorite stat. 1% of high school football players make it to college. 1% of those players make it to the NFL. Well, there's still a lot of players. There's still 7 rounds, 30 times 30 guys get picked in the NFL every single year. Yeah, the only reason it's 1% is because there's so many it's a big pool. A big pool. 1% of a million people is still a lot of people that we're not taking care of correctly at all. And you're saying, okay, these kids really need to value their education, need to focus on their education. Yeah, that's great. That's great, Jimmy Harbaugh. That's great. You want to have them focus on the education, then they're not going to play as well, and they'll lose their scholarship, and they won't have that education. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. It's kind of a little oxymoron, juxtaposition, blah blah, whatever cliche or idiom you want to say. It's interesting they say it works out that way, Jimmy, because what do you expect this kid to do? What if you recruit a kid, put him on a scholarship? Okay, now you got to perform. You could say, I wouldn't revoke his scholarship. He's just not playing well. I wouldn't revoke his scholarship. He got hurt. People get hurt. People have their scholarships revoked. It happens all the time, and they lose that ultra valuable education that you're so worried about. I mean, I can give you the quote he gave. This is from MichiganLive.com or MLive.com, and he said that 4 years of playing high school football, I don't think anybody has looked back on that and said they wish they hadn't played. This is a quote from Harbaugh. But now you take all those people who played all 4 years of high school football. I believe the percentage is 1% of them will go on to play college football. And of them, all the players that play college football, and then all the college players that play college football, I think that the percentage is actually 1% that will actually play an NFL game. Yeah, probably true. It's just the pool is so huge that, yeah, a little 1% of that pool is still going to be pretty large, and you're going to have some issues. So, well, yeah, where is he going? What's the deal with this? I mean, he continues saying that something after high school is a must these days. Really, that education is the most valuable, and what's the most important. Sometimes somebody thinks what's good for them and what they need are two different things. Yeah, that's true, but they also work hand in hand. You're going to what's good for them is an education, of course, absolutely. No, hands down, not going to argue that. But that education is coming right on the back of the fact that this guy runs a 4.3 40 or can move, is 350 pounds and can move a man 5 feet. It's also 350 pounds and block, or has great hands, or has a rocket arm, or whatever position he might be. Can defend, can cover a receiver. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're all coming on the piggyback of that. They're not coming. I mean, yeah, there are plenty of guys, not plenty, but there are guys out there who are great academically as they are athletically. But there's just as many who are only going to that school because they can play football, and they're only getting the education because they can play football or basketball or whatever it may have you. It's just the way it is. I'm preaching here just to explain that this really, it makes sense. He says that they shouldn't get paid, obviously. He comes out and says, no, I don't think they should get paid, basically, these players. When he was asked that, I mean, he continues to say, he does get serious, obviously, on the matter. He says, obviously, if the player receives a $650,000 or $6,500 athletic scholarship, obviously, would they add a salary onto that? I don't know. He doesn't really know when it comes to pay tax. He said of course. Oh, what happens when it comes to pay taxes? You're going to lose half that money. What's going to be happening? I mean, say the government is going to be like, oh, you're going to owe us 40% in taxes. So they're really getting out ahead because they are not having to get paid and not having to pay taxes, but they are still getting a free education, which is tax free. That's his comment. Okay, well then make it a stipend situation where, I mean, you're going to use tax. You're going to hide under the tax. This whole tax example of it. I mean, it doesn't make sense in itself, but there's some. There are probably some states that obviously don't have a state tax and stuff like that, so I don't have to worry about that. Maybe that might make it unfair for them in recruiting if this came to that. But I mean, it is a complicated situation where maybe they just need to up the insurance deductible or whatever it may be to help protect these kids that are injured, and also the kids that might not deserve their scholarship anymore. But sorry. Too bad. This valuable education that we're so lovingly paying you with is no longer available to you because you're not. We don't want you anymore, or something like that. So, it's weird. It's very weird. I understand. He does make a good point. Jimmy did make a good point with the taxes, but there's probably a way. I'm sure you can figure it all out. Where you can get it to where it doesn't affect these players. I don't know about 40% of the money would be going to the government. That's something they would not be in that tax bracket. I can tell you, on a salary of $40,000, if you were to pay the kid $40,000. I'm not even saying pay the kid $40,000. I said pay for something. Make him just be available. Why don't you give them the choice to not have that amateur tag on them, and be able to use their likeness for their own game, because God knows the NBA, the NCAA is using it, and the ESPN's using it, I mean, these players, these big name guys, Baker Mayfield. You think Baker Mayfield could have made money while he was at OU before he got drafted? Yeah, the guy could have made money before he got drafted. And if he made that money, if he decided himself to do that. So this is taking it out of the hands of these schools. You're not going to put burden on the schools that can't afford it, because there are schools that can't afford it. I mean, even Jim Harbaugh actually goes to say it, they notice it. They note it in this report, that this article that came out about Jim Harbaugh, that some schools wouldn't be able to afford it. It would be a burden on some athletic departments. So don't make the athletic departments pay them. Just make these athletes who have the likeness and have the brand already developed throughout their college career, and let them use it. Like, what's taking away the whole idea with Terrell Pryor, or who was it? I think it was Terrell Pryor, with the issues in Columbus, getting tattoos or signing autographs for jewelry, and Jim Tressel was involved in it as well. So I mean, or knew about it, got him in trouble. I mean, why is that an issue? What's the big deal? Who's that hurting? Who's that taking money away from? Nobody. I mean, how would that take away money away? I really want the NCAA to explain that and say these players can't use their likeness because they're. It wouldn't take any money away from anybody. You know what it would do? It would de-rationalize the fact that they're amateurs. The whole amateurism tag would go right out the window. But if you can, I mean, it's called exceptions. There's an exception to every kind of rule. You can still, quote unquote, be amateurs. You just aren't going to get paid by the school directly. You can go get yourself an agent and make your money yourself. Get an endorsement, get whatever you want. I mean, it's free market capitalism out there. Why are they being shielded from using their likeness and using their brand? I mean, like Baker Mayfield's a perfect example. I mean, so is Sam Darnold. So is all these guys that go to the big schools. I mean, that's really the only guys that are probably going to get paid anyways. I mean, I'm not telling you. Obviously, there's a lot of different reasons why, like, some of these schools can't afford it, because the football program in a lot of these big schools is the program that makes the money in order to pay for the lesser programs that don't really make any money, or they go build, or they pull in Alabama and go build a brand new state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar workout room and spa area and whatever they did, new facilities for the players. Yeah, great. Why don't you let Tua Tagovailoa? Because I mean, look at the guy who already played. It's another good example for a guy who's still in college. Played his freshman year in the national championship game, won the national championship game for you. Probably made that win right there is probably worth millions of dollars in itself for the University of Alabama. And now he can't reap any of the rewards from that. He can just go out there and play more football and hopefully stay healthy until he gets drafted in the NFL 3 years from now. He can't go out and do anything. He has 3 years of prime time being on ESPN, being talked about on the radio, being talked about on my show, Paul Feinbaum's show, everybody's show. I mean, the guys in our have been talked about a lot, so he can't make anything off of that. No, nothing. Can't go back to Hawaii and sell T-shirts. Can't go sign autographs. His family's way over there. I mean, hopefully they're getting something from the University of Alabama, or they're finding it right themselves. But you could do something to help out. I mean, there's a reason why we're getting all these scandals coming out. There's a reason why we had the Reggie Bush issue a few years ago with USC. That his family had nothing, and he's on TV every day, and they're like, Pete Carroll, hello, can we get a little piece of the pie here? Like, you're putting our boy on TV every single day. Like, hello, can we get some help? Like, this is ridiculous. So, I mean, tying this back to the whole Jim Harbaugh comments, yeah. He doesn't think that they should get paid. It is a good point with the whole tax situation. I don't know about 40%. That's the one thing I'm just kind of questioning, with the fact that he's worried about the government coming back and getting the money that we're paying these kids. So we're really saving them from the government and the government, filling the government's coffers basically with their taxes. We're saving them from taxes by not paying them. Okay, we'll go let them make their own decisions and make some money off of their own brand, their own likeness, and they can pay their own taxes. If they don't want to pay taxes, then they don't have to go out and get an agent. They don't have to go out and make money off of themselves if they don't want to pay taxes. Don't make it their option. make them available. You can make an exemption to the whole quote unquote amateurism, and let them go create their own, use the free capitalist market for their own gain, just earlier than they normally would. I just don't what the difference between being in college and being on ESPN and being in a professional team and being on ESPN. I mean, it's just, you're still all over national television, whether it's ESPN, Fox, NBC. I mean, Notre Dame football, they have a deal to be exclusively broadcasted on NBC every day, every week. So they're on national television every week. If you're anywhere in the nation, you can watch Notre Dame football. Notre Dame on NBC. It's been like that since 1991. I mean, geez, get your stuff together, NCAA. Let these kids make some money off their likeness. If you're not going to pay them, because, I mean, you've already got Jim Harbaugh out here saying these things and making some sense and some not sense. I get the taxes issue. I don't know about 40%, like I said, but you could do something. Make some exemptions to your amateurism, student athlete. I mean, the fact that they created that was ridiculous. You know why they created that? You know why they came up with the name student athlete? Number one, it was like 100 years ago they came up with it, and they came up with it to get around workmen's compensation lawsuits. That's why they came up with that word, to save money when these kids get hurt. All right, we'll be back with some talk on the coaching rankings, and we'll talk about some top coaches around college. Jim Harbaugh, likely one of them. Obviously, you got Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Kirby Smart. Chip Kelly's now in UCLA, so lots of guys to get to, and we'll give my thoughts on a bunch of them. So we'll do that when we come back. Enough ranting for me. I'm back in a few minutes.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, welcome back. GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition, as we have done the final Power 5. Remember, I've kind of gone through all the Power 5 conferences and how each team stacks up and looking at their outlook for the season. Gone through a bunch of schedules for each team in the Power 5 conference. Wrapped that up today with the Big 12. I believe we did SEC and Pac-12 on Monday. Wednesday was the Big 10 and the ACC, and then today is the Big 12. So maybe next week we'll get to some schools that are not in the in those big conferences, but are still talked about, like Boise State and Notre Dame, to name a couple there. There's probably more I'm just not thinking of right now at the top of my head. Central Florida also, as UCF was up in the top rankings last year as well. But I talked about them a little bit earlier. But now we're going to get to this. CBS Sports does come out with a top 25 coaching rankings, and as they rank the top 25, these are for the Power 5 conferences, so nobody really in those peripheral conferences. But for the Power 5, I think they may have thrown, if they threw Brian Kelly in here. I don't think so, though. Yeah, I don't see Notre Dame. So, Brian Kelly not in there. So right now, right now the top 10 is. I'll give you I'll kind of give you their stat. I'll give you their rankings and then talk about how I think about it and where I'd put them, and give you my opinion on what's going on here. But from CBS Sports and their team, I think this was Tom Fornelli who did these rankings, and obviously Brian Kelly is in there talking about this tradition. They do all 65 coaches, and then obviously Brian Kelly in there as well. So but he's not in this top 25 yet. Obviously, there's numbers 65 through 26. They also have that too. So we'll just look at the top 25. Right now, it's obviously up on top. He's been on top of the pile. I mean, obviously, he's the number one guy. That's That's Nick Saban. No arguments there. Urban Meyer, number 2. Dabo Swinney, that's the one thing I think in Dabo and Jimbo Fisher being 3 and 4 is interesting because Jimbo obviously coming to the next team had a interesting season last year with Florida State. I think Chris Peterson, obviously, he's number 5. I think I'd flip-flop him and Jimbo. Dabo Swinney's a great coach. He deserves to be number 3. I mean, being able to sustain the Clemson success, obviously getting that defense the way it is, but he's not only a great football mind, but he's a great interview. He's great with the fans. He's great with his teammates off the field, with his team off the field. Very good energy guy. Gets his team ready to play whenever he needs. Obviously, even with losing a guy like Deshaun Watson and going right to Kelly Bryant, now he's got Trevor Lawrence to make a decision. So, if anybody's going to make the right decision there, it'll likely be Dabo at number 3. Like I said, they have Chris Peterson number 5. I like Chris Peterson flip-flop with Jimbo Fisher. Honestly, I would drop Jimbo Fisher probably down to like 7 or 8 because they have David Shaw at 7 right now. I love David Shaw. I love Gary Patterson at TCU as well. So I'm not the biggest Jimbo Fisher fan at all. Obviously, Jimbo getting the most money. This, of course, in these rankings have their little comments in each of them, and it's just like, it was based on guaranteed money. No way. Of course, Jimbo would be number 1 if it was based off of just how much money he was making, because he's making a lot. But I'm not the biggest Jimbo fan. Obviously, he does have the national championship under his belt, but he had a great roster. Not that difficult to coach that team, honestly. But yeah, I think I would drop him. Honestly, I would drop Jimbo probably like always at 9 because I love Kirby Smart, who's at 8, Shaw's at 7, Gary Patterson at 6. So, I mean, if I was to redo my top 10, my top 10 would probably be Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Dabo Swinney. Honestly, I put David Shaw at number 4 because he's that good. I mean, the fact that he's had to deal with all these injuries at Stanford, but keeping that team viable, even after Andrew Luck left, is a great recruiter, finds kids all over the nation that are both academically ready and athletically ready to play at that university, which is very rigorous in both the stands, as they have high standards, obviously when it comes to academics, but also a very good athletic school all around for all different sports, women's and men. So Stanford is tough. So I would say I would put David Shaw as number 4. Then I'd do Chris Peterson and Gary Patterson 6 and 7, and then have Kirby Smart at 8 as he is there. So, I mean, Kirby Smart could be getting up higher we'll have to wait and see. The sample size is a little small, even though last year with the freshman quarterback, he was able to get to the national championship game. Got to give the guy credit. Last year, did win the SEC as well. So, got to give Kirby Smart some credit. He could be up there, maybe in up to number 5 behind David Shaw as well, or 3 if he unseats Dabo Swinney as well. In my book, they have Chip Kelly at 9. Chip Kelly coming in. That's a pretty high ranking for a guy who hasn't even coached the team yet. We haven't seen him coach a game with his new team. Obviously, we know his pedigree from back when he was at Oregon. Also had a little bit of success in the NFL. Then he went to San Francisco and did not have any success. Took a year off, and now he's back in the old college football game down in Brentwood. So he'll be the coach for the UCLA Bruins. Next up, number 10 to round off this top 10. So, I mean, I kind of gave you my top 8 right there because I didn't get to 9 and 10. But I do agree with these rankings. I might flip-flop James Franklin and put him at 9 because I love James Franklin. I think he deserves to be at 9. Chip Kelly coming off hasn't been in the college football in 4 or 5 years. So he hasn't coached in the college level since 2012, so 6 years. So yeah, I was being generous. I thought it wasn't, but yeah, 6 years since Chip Kelly's been in college football. So definitely I would put James Franklin at number 9. The fact that he's been able to do what he's done with Penn State, even after they did reinstate those scholarships, and he got him and he ran with them, getting a guy like Saquon Barkley, he has Trace McSorley. I mean, he's got other talent everywhere on the defense. Just kind of been able to make that team definitely competitive, even with coaches like Urban Meyer in his conference. I mean, being in that SEC, being in that Pac, I keep saying the wrong conference, in that Big Ten Eastern Division is absolutely the toughest thing in the world. Honestly, I think. I mean, you got number 1, you got Mike D'Antonio, who is number 16 on this list, by the way, or Mark D'Antonio. in East Lansing at Michigan State. Then you got Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, and you got Urban Meyer at Ohio State. So, I mean, all huge names and legendary names. And then you have James Franklin, who's just gone in there and made his own name for himself and created his own success and done pretty much everything that he's been asked to do. Obviously, getting Saquon Barkley as he will have to replace him coming into the season, and all eyes, of course, all eyes, especially my eyes, will be watching James Franklin as he gets to go. And obviously, they also lose their offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead, who goes down to become the head coach of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. All right, continuing along here, Mike Gundy's number 11. I agree with that. I think Bill Snyder's a little high. He gets that old timer. I mean, he's the legendary status, obviously, where I think he gets bumped up a few spots for being so good for so long. Probably Dan Mullen's behind him with Gus Malzahn, and Lincoln Riley is 13, 14, 15. I love Lincoln Riley. I'd throw Lincoln Riley up there, maybe even closer to the top 10. I think what he's been able to do even in his first season with Oklahoma, being a perfect successor for Bob Stoops. Obviously, you have Baker Mayfield is a helpful thing, but I feel like for him, I mean, obviously we had So it looks like reading what they had to say about these rankings is that one of the guys, a bunch of their other experts had him ranked higher. So he got bogged down by one of the other guys who were voting on this list. So if I was voting on the list, he'd be up higher as well. Just to let you guys know there at CBS Sports, if you're listening, I would have put Lincoln Riley up closer, not in the top 10 probably, but definitely at number 11 right there, with Mike Gundy probably being 12th. And Bill Snyder probably being in that 15 slot behind Malzahn and Dan Mullen, because, I mean, Dan Mullen's a great coach. What he's been able to do at Mississippi State, kind of in the shadow of all the other SEC schools. Now he's going to go to Florida, which is a massive program. Obviously haven't seen much success since Urban Meyer left. Maybe he could bring it back, as he will be there for his first year at Florida now. So, yeah, I mean, he was 21st in the nation in coaching, and now he's at 13th now that he has the Florida roster. So, I mean, rosters do help, obviously. Roster talent will seriously help you when it comes to coaching. Gus Malzahn, love Gus Malzahn, but always been a Gus Malzahn fan on Auburn. What he was able to do with Kerryon Johnson, getting him in positions to be successful, and also a very animated guy on the sideline. Love watching the Auburn games and seeing what he's going to do. I would have put him, like I said, I would put him probably a slot up with Bill Snyder falling down. They have Lincoln Riley behind him, which is, I think, kind of a crock. But the fact that he's been able to do it for 1 year, maybe we need to see some sustained success from Lincoln Riley in order to see him get up in the rankings. I can agree with that a little bit. As far as Mark D'Antonio, he was able to bounce back after a bad year, probably bogged down his ranking a little bit. I would probably have him right here as well. There's just so many good guys around the coaching ranks, as we're going to have 3 big names coming up next year. We'll probably get to the top 20 before we run out of time for today. But Mark D'Antonio, love him. Then Mark Richt at Miami, remember the old Georgia coach, now down at Coral Gables in Miami. So he's got to be happy living down there, as well as having a good team down there too. So, I mean, college football is better when Miami is good. So, obviously, a team that's been historically good and looking like they could be on a roll to get into the national championship situation and conversation again this year. Obviously, 9-4 last year, then coming back 10-3 after. They were 10-0 and then ended up losing their last 3 games. So, hopefully, bounce back with another hot start this year and be able to sustain it the rest of the season. 18, 19, 20, they have Pat Fitzgerald from Northwestern at 20. I like that. He's a good coach. You'll probably see his name creep up this list a lot. Paul Chryst and Jim Harbaugh at 19, and then 18. Jim Harbaugh at 18, we talked about him obviously a lot in the last segment, as he obviously still hasn't been able to find that quarterback at Michigan, and hopefully we'll get one this year in Shea Patterson that he can develop and turn into a star that we'll be watching for Michigan this year. Obviously, only a couple. I think he's only going to have this this season and next season to show what he's got and maybe get a chance to be drafted in the NFL. So we'll be looking at that. To wind out the top 25, I'll give you what they have here. Scott Frost is at 21. David Cutcliffe at Duke is number 22. Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, 23. Mike Leach, 24. Washington State. And then Kyle Whittingham at Utah, 25. I like Kyle Whittingham. Has a connection to my hometown as we have his family out here in California, but definitely been a good coach. Gets the old Folsom High School coach, where at my high school, old head coach Troy Taylor to be his offensive coordinator. Hopefully, we'll get Utah going in the right track when it comes to getting their offense running. Speaking of offense, Mike Leach always been that guy. Loves the offense, loved the air raid, loved to throw the ball down the field. He loses Luke Falk, have to replace him this year with another big passing quarterback, but leave it to Mike Leach to find a guy who can get the ball down the field, and he'll definitely be doing that. And we'll look to see how Washington State bounces back after a very nice season last year. Honestly, did just miss the national to get into the Pac-12 championship game. All right, that'll wrap it up for the show today, as we have covered a bunch of stuff today. We covered a bunch of coaching stuff for the second half of the show. I went over and talked about the Big 12 and went through their schedules. All 10 teams there, all 10 teams in the Big 12 to finish out all the Power 5 overview, the conference by conference thing I was doing this whole week. So hope you guys enjoyed that, and we'll be back on Monday for some more talk on college football. I have to see what's going on with some stories. We'll probably do some recruiting stuff next week, as a bunch of guys are going to be deciding where they're going to be playing their football in the coming months. They'll be deciding where they're going to play their football this year, in their freshman year in college, and which offer they're going to be deciding to take. Whether it's juniors deciding for the next couple of years, for the class of 2018 or class of 2019, doesn't matter. I'll be going over it. You're going to get the information here on the GSMC Football Podcast, the college football edition of this podcast. And I have been Tom Dougherty, your host, and we'll see you on Monday. So everybody have a good weekend. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.